most brides cry tears of joy on their wedding day. I cried because my parents handed me a bill for $500,000, $500,000 for diapers, for food, for everything they were legally supposed to provide. But they didn't know. I had been keeping my own ledger since I was 12 years old. Every insult, every neglect, every moment they made me feel worthless, I wrote it all down. And on my wedding day, when they demanded payment, I gave them an invoice too. What happened next changed my life forever. And trust me, you won't believe who ended up owing who. My name is Allure Vance, and this is the story of how my wedding day became the stage for the greatest performance of my life. It's a story about love, yes, but not the kind you might expect. It's a story about the quiet, calculated revenge I served cold after 26 years of being made to feel like a debt that could never be repaid. You know, most little girls dream about their wedding day from the moment they can hold a crayon. They draw pictures of big, puffy white dresses and castles made of cake. They imagine their father walking them down the aisle, a tear in his eye, beaming with pride. I was different. I never drew castles. I drew spreadsheets. I drew ledgers. I drew lists. Even as a child, deep in my bones, I knew that my relationship with my parents was a transaction. They were my custodians, and I was an investment they expected a return on. I just didn't know the exact nature of that return until the day I said, I do. Let me take you back. My parents, Richard and Patricia Vance, were not the warmest people. They were successful, ambitious, and meticulous. Everything in their lives was neat, orderly, and accounted for. And I, their only child, was the biggest line item in their life's ledger. From a very young age, I was made to understand that I was a burden. They never said it in so many words, of course. It was in the sighs, the glances, the way they would talk about their friends' children who were already on the honor roll, or who had gotten into a prestigious summer program. I was always being measured, weighed, and found slightly wanting. My mother was the one who kept the household running like a military operation. Her favorite phrase was, Allure, do you have any idea how much this costs? It could be about a new pair of shoes, a field trip, or even a carton of milk. She'd look at me with those sharp, calculating eyes and say, we work so hard for you, Allure. We hope you appreciate it. There was no love in her voice. There was only a reminder of obligation. My father was more passive. He was a quiet man, always buried in his work or his newspaper. He never hugged me, never ruffled my hair. He would just nod at me when I came into a room, as if acknowledging the presence of a piece of furniture. He was the silent partner in the operation, the one who signed the checks and kept the books. My mother was the CEO, and she was brilliant at her job. The job of making me feel like a permanent, inconvenient liability. I remember one Christmas when I was about 7 years old. All the other kids in my class were talking about the presents they wanted. They had lists for Santa Claus. I had a list too, but it wasn't for Santa. My mother had given me a notebook and told me to write down everything I wanted for Christmas, along with the price. She said she needed to budget. I spent hours in my room, carefully writing down the cost of a doll, a new coat, some books. When I proudly presented it to her, she looked it over and crossed out half the items. We can't afford all of this, Allure. You need to be more realistic. I remember feeling so ashamed, so guilty for wanting things. I learned early that wanting was dangerous. Wanting made you a burden. When I turned 16, the tone of the conversation changed. It became more direct, more strategic. Allure, my mother began one evening, sitting me down at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea she would never offer me on a normal day. You need to understand that your father and I have a financial plan for our retirement. We've scrimped and saved and put money aside for you your whole life. We're hoping, when you're successful, you'll be able to help us out. We have a net worth to maintain. It was presented as a natural expectation, like a return on an investment. I remember feeling a cold stone settle in my stomach. I was in high school. I should have been worried about prom dates and college applications. Instead, I was being given a job description for my future. My purpose, it seemed, was to secure their financial future. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, trying to process what they had just told me. I was 16 years old, and my parents had just essentially told me that my entire existence was a financial transaction. I wasn't a daughter, I was a retirement plan. I was a stock they had invested in and were now expecting to pay dividends. The worst part was, I couldn't even be angry. I was too sad, too confused. I spent the whole night crying silently into my pillow, wondering if this was normal. Wondering if other parents talked to their children this way. Wondering if I was just being ungrateful and dramatic. The next morning, I went downstairs and acted like nothing had happened. I made my own breakfast, packed my own lunch, and walked to school. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my teachers. I was too ashamed. I thought that maybe if I just worked hard enough, studied enough, achieved enough, I would finally earn their love. I would finally be enough. I would pay them back and then they would love me. Fast forward a few years. I worked my way through college on a partial scholarship and a mountain of student loans because my parents, having established their plans, were not offering any help. It will build character, my mother said. You need to understand the value of $1. I understood the value of $1. I was working 3 part-time jobs to pay for the privilege of a university education. I lived on instant noodles and wore thrift store clothes. Every time I spoke to them, they'd ask about my major, my grades, and then, inevitably, my career prospects. Do you think you'll be making 6 figures right out of college? It was never, are you happy, Alina? Or, are you making friends? I remember one particularly cold winter in my sophomore year. I had come down with a terrible flu. I had a fever of 103 degrees, and I was so weak I could barely get out of bed. I had no money for a doctor. I called my mother, hoping for some comfort. She answered the phone, and I could barely speak through my cough. Mom, I'm really sick. I think I need to see a doctor. There was a long pause on the other end. Well, Alina, I hope you've been saving some money from all those jobs of yours. Medical care is expensive, you know. Maybe you should have thought about that before getting sick. We really can't afford to bail you out every time you have a problem. I hung up the phone and cried for hours. I didn't call them again that whole year. I just suffered in silence, trying to survive. Through all of this, I met Leo. Leo was my opposite in every way. He was warm, generous, and came from a family who hugged each other and told each other they loved one another. His parents, Jim and Barbara, welcomed me into their home like I was their own daughter. His mother would cook me my favorite meals and ask about my day, genuinely interested. His father would cheer me on at my small, amateur art shows. They were the embodiment of love I had only ever seen in movies. Leo was the only person who ever made me feel like I was enough. He looked at me not as an investment or a problem to be solved, but as a person. The first time I went to Leo's house for Thanksgiving, I was so nervous I could barely eat. His family was so loud, so chaotic, so full of love. They were teasing each other, laughing, passing food around the table. His mother kept piling food onto my plate, telling me I was too skinny. His father kept telling embarrassing stories about Leo as a child. Everyone was laughing and talking at the same time. It was overwhelming. I had never experienced anything like it. I sat there, watching them, feeling like an outsider looking in on a world I could never be part of. And then, in the middle of dinner, Barbara reached over and squeezed my hand. We are so happy you're here, sweetheart. Your family now, you know. I burst into tears right there at the dinner table. Everyone thought I was crazy, but I couldn't help it. No one had ever said that to me before. No one had ever made me feel like I belonged. When Leo proposed, I said yes immediately. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building a future that was my own. A future built on love and partnership, not on debt and obligation. He knew my parents were challenging. He had seen the way they spoke to me, the dismissive tone, the way they would turn a happy moment into a dissertation on my shortfalls. He always defended me, standing up for me with a quiet firmness that made my heart swell. One night, after a particularly difficult phone call with my mother, Leo held me while I cried. Why do you even talk to them, Ellie? He asked softly. They don't deserve you. You are the most wonderful person I know, and they can't even see it. I looked up at him through my tears. They're my parents, Leo. They gave me life. I have to try. Maybe one day they'll change. Maybe one day they'll see me. He just held me tighter, not saying anything. He knew there was no reasoning with me. I had been conditioned my whole life to believe that I owed them something, that I had to keep trying, that if I just loved them enough, they would love me back. The engagement period was a minefield. My mother, of course, took it over. She wanted to plan the wedding of the year. She had to have the best venue, the most expensive flowers, a 5-tier cake. I wanted a small, intimate wedding. A garden party, maybe. Something simple and lovely. But my mother's voice was loud and persistent. She argued that the wedding was a reflection on the family and that she had a reputation to uphold. She started talking about how much our wedding would cost and who would be paying for it. "We need to think about the guest list, Alina," she said one afternoon, clicking her pen against her clipboard. "Your father and I have many important business associates. We need to invite them. They'll expect a certain level of elegance. We can't have a backyard barbecue, for goodness sake. This is a wedding, not a picnic." I tried to argue, tried to explain that Leo and I wanted something small and intimate. She just dismissed me. "What do you know about planning a wedding? You're just a girl, let me handle this." It was the same story my whole life. I was just a girl, I didn't know anything. They knew better. They always knew better. I had a full-time job as a graphic designer. I wasn't making a fortune, but I was comfortable. Leo was an architect. We had been saving for a down payment on a house. We had enough for a small, tasteful wedding. My mother, however, had grandiose visions, and her visions came with a 6-figure price tag. After months of fighting, Leo and I finally put our foot down. We were funding our own wedding. We would have a modest ceremony and reception at a lovely botanical garden. It would be beautiful, and it would be ours. The day I told my mother that I was taking over the wedding planning was one of the worst days of my life. She sat in her living room, her arms crossed, her face like stone. "You're making a mistake, Alina. You're embarrassing this family. People are going to talk. They're going to think we can't afford a proper wedding for our daughter. Do you want to make us look poor? Is that what you want?" I stood my ground, my hands shaking. "I don't care what people think, Mom. This is my wedding, Leo's wedding. We're paying for it, and we want to do it our way." She looked at me with pure contempt. "Fine," she hissed, "but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart." I walked out of her house that day feeling both liberated and terrified. I had finally stood up to her, but at what cost? My father was quiet, as usual. He just watched the altercation with a detached sense of interest, like he was observing a business deal he wasn't directly involved in. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a silent, cold war. The wedding was happening, they were coming, but there was a frost in the air. I tried to reach out to them multiple times. I invited them to dress fittings, to venue walkthroughs. They declined every time. My mother said she was too busy with her own life. My father said he had too much work. I felt like I was losing them, but honestly, I wasn't sure if I ever really had them in the first place. Leo's family, on the other hand, was involved in everything. Barbara helped me pick my dress. Jim helped Leo with the suit shopping. They treated me like their own daughter, and every time they did, I felt a painful pang in my chest. This is what it should have been like. This is what I had been missing my whole life. The night before the wedding, I was alone in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. Leo was at his parents' house. I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "See you tomorrow, Alina. We have a surprise for you." A surprise. My stomach churned. In my family, surprise was never a good thing. Surprises were just hidden agendas, another opportunity for them to assert control. I spent the whole night tossing and turning, wondering what they were planning. I should have known then. I should have been prepared. That brings me to the day of my wedding. It was a beautiful, sunny afternoon at the botanical garden. Everything was perfect. The flowers were in bloom, the white chairs were set up in neat rows, and the soft sound of a string quartet filled the air. I was in the bridal suite, a small, sun-drenched room attached to the main building. I was in my dress, a simple, beautiful A-line gown that was exactly what I wanted. My maid of honor, my best friend Julia, was helping me with my veil. I looked at myself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. I looked beautiful. I looked happy. For a moment, I forgot about my parents. I forgot about the Cold War. I was just a bride on her wedding day, about to marry the man of her dreams. Julia was telling me a funny story about her own wedding, and I was laughing. For just a few minutes, everything was perfect. Then there was a sharp knock on the door. My heart sank. I knew that knock. It was a hard, impatient knock, my mother's knock. I took a deep breath and opened the door. There she stood, in a designer dress and a face full of makeup. My father was behind her, his face impassive, holding a leather-bound folder. He always held a folder. My mother didn't say, "You look beautiful." She didn't offer a hug. She just stepped past me into the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Julia's eyes went wide. My mother didn't even acknowledge her presence. This was a business meeting. I braced myself. "Eleanor," she began, her voice cold and precise. "We have something to discuss with you. It's very important." My heart started to pound. "What is it, Mom? The ceremony starts in an hour." She turned to my father. He opened the folder and pulled out a single piece of paper. "This," my mother said, taking the paper and holding it out to me, "is an itemized statement. An invoice, if you will." I stared at the piece of paper, my hands trembling as I took it. My eyes scanned the top. It was a professionally formatted invoice. At the top, it said, "Statement of account for Eleanor Vance." Below that, in a clean, clear font, was a list of figures. Item, diapers, formula, and childcare. 15 years, $65,000. Item, food and clothing. 18 years, $75,000. Item, private school tuition. 13 years, $70,000. Item, extracurricular activities. 12 years, $45,000. Item, college expenses, reimbursement for foregone retirement savings. $120,000. Item, general cost of living and housing. 18 years, $100,000. Item, oversight, management, and administrative fees. $25,000. There was a grand total at the bottom, in bold, black letters. Balance due, $500,000. My world stopped. I looked up at them, my vision blurry. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It's a bill, Eleanor," my mother said, her tone matter-of-fact. "For the cost of raising you, we've been very patient. We've been waiting for this moment. Now that you're marrying and starting your own financial life, it's time for you to start paying us back. We have a retirement to fund." I felt like I had been physically punched in the gut. "You're charging me for raising me, on my wedding day." "Don't be dramatic," my mother snapped. "It's not a charge, it's reimbursement. We gave you a good life. We taught you manners, we put you through school, we instilled values in you, and all of that cost us money, a lot of money." My father finally spoke. "We need this, Eleanor. Our investments have not been performing as we'd hoped. This is a sensible financial decision. We feel it's only fair." My mind was reeling. It wasn't about fairness. It was about cruelty. It was about control. It was about them finally, on the most important day of my life, extracting that pound of flesh they had been salivating over for years. I looked down at the invoice again. The cold, heartless list. Diapers, formula, food. It was grotesque. It was like they had reduced my entire childhood to a series of transactions. My stomach churned. For a moment, I was that little girl again, standing in the kitchen being told how much I cost, being made to feel like a burden. A feeling of crushing, empty sadness washed over me. Then, something else. A strange, quiet click. Like a lock turning in my heart. The sadness hardened. The confusion turned to clarity. All the years of their emotional manipulation and financial browbeating crystallized into a single, diamond-hard point of focus. I looked at them, my mother's smug expression and my father's passive, empty face. I saw them for what they were. They were not my parents. They were my investors, and they were demanding their dividend. Then a calmness settled over me, the kind of calm that comes before a storm. I took the invoice and folded it neatly. I put it in my clutch bag. "Thank you for this," I said, my voice as cold and precise as hers. "It clarifies a lot." My mother looked taken aback. "Clarifies? Good, we expect prompt payment. We can set up a payment plan. There will be interest, of course." "Oh, I know," I said, nodding. "I understand business, Mother. You taught me well. I have a little something for you, too, since we're being so thorough." I walked over to a small vanity table where my purse was. I opened it and pulled out a thick manila envelope. My hands were steady. The trembling was gone. All that was left was the cold, sweet taste of vengeance. I had been preparing for this moment. I didn't know why. I didn't know if I was just a crazy person or if I had subconsciously known for years that something like this would happen. but I had been keeping a ledger. My own ledger. I walked back to them and handed the envelope to my mother. "Since we're settling accounts," I said, "this is my itemized invoice to you." Her face went pale. She looked at me, then at the envelope, then back at me. She slowly opened it and pulled out the papers inside. "Item 1, I began, reciting from memory as she stared at the page. "Kindergarten, age 5. You bought me a pink dress for picture day. You only bought it because my teacher called you and told you I was wearing the same dress I wore to school every day. You made me pay for it with 2 weeks of my allowance. You told me my teacher thought I was a charity case and that I had embarrassed you. Emotional damage, $20,000. Her eyes widened. "Item 2, I continued, my voice unwavering. "Age 8, the school play. I had the lead role. I was so excited. You showed up 2 hours late and missed my entire performance. You told me it was my fault for not reminding you enough. You said my acting was mediocre anyway. Emotional damage, $25,000. "You're being ridiculous," my mother choked out. "Am I?" I said. "Let's continue. Item 3, age 12, my first period. I was terrified. I had no idea what was happening. I ran to you. You looked at me with disgust and handed me a box of tampons and a pamphlet. You told me not to bother you with woman problems. You made me feel dirty and ashamed. Emotional damage, $30,000. My father was looking at the papers now, his mouth slightly agape. I had him. He always thought he was just the silent enforcer, but he was the one who enabled all of it. "Item 4, I said, looking him dead in the eye. "High school, age 16. I was diagnosed with anxiety. I had panic attacks. I was terrified I was losing my mind. Dad, you told me to toughen up and that it was all in my head. You refused to get me help because it would look bad on the family record. The attacks only got worse. I had to handle them alone. I had to learn to calm myself down in the middle of the night, sobbing into my pillow. Medical neglect, $50,000. His face went red. "That is a gross exaggeration, Alina." "Keep reading," I said calmly. "Item 5, I said, taking a slight pause. "College, I was working 3 jobs to pay my way. You called me one night, all excited. I thought maybe, just maybe, you were calling to see how I was. You asked me how my grades were. I told you I had a 3.9 GPA. You were silent. Then you asked, why not a 4? You asked me why I was not trying harder. You said if I wasn't going to be at the top, I shouldn't bother telling you about it. You hung up. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Emotional damage, $40,000. My mother's face was a mask of fury, but she couldn't speak. Her hands were shaking. The numbers were adding up. Item 6, I said, feeling a strange sense of liberation with every word. The day I got my first job, I was so proud. I was finally going to be independent. I called you, crying with joy. You told me the salary was an insult. You said you expected me to do better. You told me I was a disappointment. You told me I would never be able to afford to pay you back. Emotional damage, $35,000. Item 7, I continued. Every single time I've come home for the holidays for the past 10 years. Every time you pointed out my weight, my hair, my clothes. Every time you compared me to your friends' children. Every time you told me I'd never find a man who would put up with me. General, systematic belittling and emotional abuse. Annual rate of $15,000 for 10 years. Total, $150,000. Item 8, I said, my voice dropping to a low, deadly whisper. My engagement, I was so happy. I was floating on air. I came to tell you. And you, Mom, you looked at my ring, looked at it with that critical eye and said, "It's a little small, isn't it?" You couldn't even be happy for me. You could only find fault. You poisoned the most joyful moment of my life. Emotional damage, $100,000. I paused, letting them take it in. My mother looked like she was about to have a heart attack. My father was completely silent, his eyes scanning the total at the bottom of the page. Now, let's add it up, shall we? I said, pulling out a calculator from my purse for good measure. 20 plus 25 plus 30 plus 50 plus 40 plus 35 plus 150 plus 100. That comes to, I clicked the buttons, $450,000, and that is a very conservative estimate. I could easily have charged double for the emotional trauma you've inflicted, but I'm feeling generous. Today, I'm a bride. I'm happy. I'm getting married to a man who loves me unconditionally. I'm not going to let you ruin this day, so I've waived a significant portion of what you owe me. I'll settle for $450,000 only because it's my wedding day." My mother was shaking. "This is preposterous. This is insane. You can't charge us for emotional damage. There's no proof. This is." "Oh, there's proof, Mother," I said softly. "There are years of diary entries. There are emails. There are countless voicemails. I've saved them all. I've been documenting your abuse for years. I have a folder on my computer called The Ledger. And you know what the best part is? My lawyer thinks it's a solid case. Emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, the list goes on." My father finally found his voice. "You are threatening to sue us, Alina. We are your parents." "No," I said, shaking my head with a small, sad smile. "You were my parents. You were a biological obligation. You were the people who gave me life and then spent the next 26 years making me feel like I was a debt that needed to be paid. But you are no longer my parents. You are my former custodians with whom I am now settling an account." I looked at them, my eyes filled with a resolute peace. "You can take that invoice and you can file it in the trash, or you can keep it as a memento of the day you tried to destroy me and failed. I'm not giving you a single cent. I'm finished with your ledger, your expectations, and your cruelty. The debt is paid, as far as I'm concerned. I have given you every ounce of love and happiness I had to offer, and you sucked it dry. My ledger shows you owe me, and I'm calling it even." I turned away from them. I walked to the mirror and fixed my veil, my hands steady as a rock. I looked at myself in the reflection. I saw a woman who was powerful, independent, and free. "Alina," my mother pleaded, her voice breaking for the first time, "you can't do this to us. You're our daughter. We are family." I turned back to her. "Family," I said, tasting the word like it was something sour. "You taught me that family was a business, Mother. You taught me that transactions are everything, so I'm just following your example. I'm closing the books. You're not welcome at my wedding. Please leave. You can see yourself out." They stood there, frozen, holding their pathetic invoice and looking at my own counter-invoice. For a moment, they looked confused, their power completely stripped away. The invincible creditors were now the debtors. My father looked lost. My mother looked old. The years of their own cruelty suddenly seemed to weigh on them. But my mother wasn't done. She never was. "You'll regret this, Alina," she hissed, her voice suddenly venomous. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've won, but you haven't. You've just shown everyone what an ungrateful, selfish child you are. Your father and I gave you everything. Everything. And this is how you repay us, with a piece of paper." I stood my ground. "You gave me nothing, Mother. You gave me a roof over my head and food on the table. Those are things you are legally obligated to provide. What you didn't give me was love. You didn't give me warmth. You didn't give me support. You gave me guilt. You gave me shame. You gave me a lifetime of feeling like I was never enough. And now, you're asking me to pay you for the privilege of being emotionally neglected? No, I don't think so." My father stepped forward. "Alina, please, we need that money. We're getting older. Our investments." "Your investments?" I laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh. "You have no idea what an investment is, Dad. An investment is something you nurture. Something you pour love and attention into. Something you believe in. You didn't invest in me. You tried to colonize me. You tried to own me. And now you're angry because I've broken free. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's just too bad." My mother was crying now. It was the first time I had ever seen her cry. But I felt nothing. No sympathy. No guilt. Just a cold, hard emptiness where my love for her used to be. "We just wanted what was best for you, Alina. We only ever wanted what was best for you." "No," I said firmly. "You wanted what was best for you. You wanted a retirement fund. You wanted a status symbol. You wanted a daughter you could brag about to your friends. You never wanted a daughter you could love. And that's the real tragedy here. Not the money, the love you were never capable of giving." They stood there, looking at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Maybe I had become a stranger to them. Maybe I had always been a stranger. They had never really seen me. They had only ever seen their own reflection in me. "I'm going to go get married now," I said softly. "I'm going to marry a man who loves me for who I am, not for what I can do for him. and I'm going to build a family with him. A real family. A family built on love and trust and respect. The kind of family you never gave me, and you're not going to be part of it, because you don't deserve to be." They turned slowly, as if in a trance, and walked out of the room. I watched them go. The door clicked shut behind them, and I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for my entire life. Julia rushed over to me, hugging me. "Oh my God, Ellie, that was incredible." I didn't feel incredible. I felt hollow. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. My parents were gone. My family was gone. I had just closed a chapter of my life with a legal battle. But I also felt a weight being lifted from my shoulders. A weight I never knew I was carrying. I collapsed into Julia's arms and sobbed. All the years of pain, all the years of trying so hard to earn their love, all the years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, it all came pouring out. "I just wanted them to love me, Julia," I whispered. "I just wanted them to love me." She held me tighter. "I know, sweetie, I know, but they can't. They don't know how, and that's not your fault. It never was. You are so loved. By Leo, by his family, by me. We all love you so much. You don't need them anymore." I looked at her through my tears. I know, but it still hurts. It hurts so much." "It's going to hurt for a while," she said gently. "But it will get better. I promise. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. The first day of your real life. The one you were always meant to have." I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the mirror again. My makeup was ruined. My eyes were red and puffy. I looked like a mess. But for the first time in my life, I felt beautiful. Not because of the dress or the veil or the flowers, but because I had finally found myself, the real me, the me that was strong enough to walk away. Julia helped me fix my makeup. She retouched my eyes and powdered my nose. She smoothed down my veil and adjusted my dress. "There," she said, stepping back. "Perfect. Now let's go get you married." Leo's face appeared in the doorway a few moments later. He looked anxious. "Eleanor, are you okay? I saw your parents leaving. They looked unwell. What happened?" I walked over to him and took his hands in mine. I looked into his eyes, those warm, loving eyes, and I felt the sadness fade away. "Nothing, Leo," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "I just settled an old debt. And now I'm ready to start my new life. With you." He looked at me confused. "What do you mean? What debt? What happened?" I pulled him close and whispered in his ear. "I'll tell you later, I promise. But right now, I just want to marry you. I want to say I do and start our life together. Please, just let me have this moment." He searched my eyes, looking for answers, but he didn't push. He just nodded and squeezed my hands. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, let's get married." As I walked down the aisle minutes later, I didn't look back. My father was not there to give me away. My mother was not in the front row. It was just me, walking toward Leo, toward my future. The guests were confused, whispering. But I didn't care. As I reached Leo, he whispered, "What happened? Where are your parents?" I just smiled and said, "They couldn't make it." And then I kissed him. The wedding was a blur. A beautiful, joyful blur. But when we got to the reception and Leo's parents stood up to give a toast, I finally broke down again. The tears I had been holding in all day, the years of sadness and anger, came pouring out. Jim and Barbara came over and wrapped their arms around me. They held me like a daughter, and I finally felt what it was like to be part of a real family. "Welcome to the family, sweetheart," Barbara whispered in my ear. "We love you so much, you're ours now, forever." I clung to her, sobbing. "I love you too, Barbara, I love you all. You've given me something I never thought I would have, a real family." Jim patted my back. "We've always wanted a daughter," he said, "and now we have one, the best one we could have ever asked for." Leo was standing beside me, his arm around my waist. He was crying too. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "I'm so proud of the woman you are. You're so strong, so brave. I love you so much." "I love you too, Leo," I said, looking into his eyes. "I love you more than anything." The rest of the reception was magical. I danced with Leo, with Jim, with all of our friends. I laughed and smiled and felt more joy than I had ever felt in my life. But there was always a small knot in my stomach, a reminder of what had happened earlier. The betrayal, the pain, the anger, it was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. A few weeks later, Leo and I were in our new apartment, settling into married life. One evening, I was going through my wedding memorabilia and found the manila envelope with the copy of my invoice. I was about to throw it away when Leo stopped me. "Wait," he said, "let me see that." I handed it to him. He read through it slowly, his face growing more and more serious. "This is heavy," he finally said. "You wrote all of this." I nodded. I started it when I was a teenager. I just had to make sense of it, of the way they made me feel. It was how I coped. Leo was quiet for a moment. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "You know, for a family that taught you were just a line item, they gave you a phenomenal business education." "What do you mean?" "Think about it, Ellie," he said. "They demanded payment for services rendered. You responded with your own invoice. But what you have is something they don't. You have love, you have joy, you have happiness. Those aren't things you can put a price tag on. But in a weird way, they are the ultimate revenge. The best revenge is a life well lived." We were sitting on our couch, and he pulled me close. "You know what you should do with this?" he asked, holding up the invoice. "What?" "Frame it," he said. "Put it on the wall of our living room, right next to the picture of us from the wedding, as a reminder that you are a warrior, a reminder that you are not a debt to be paid. You are a gift, the best gift I've ever been given." And so we did. The framed invoice sits on our bookshelf, right next to a photo from our perfect day. It's a reminder of where I came from and a symbol of everything I overcame. Every time I see it, I don't feel anger. I feel pride, I feel grateful, I feel free. My parents never contacted me again after that day. They retreated into their own world of ledgers and bitterness. I heard through the grapevine that they were embarrassed and had told people I was a spoiled, ungrateful child who had cut them off for no reason. I let them tell their story. I wasn't interested in fighting a war of public opinion. I had won the war that mattered. I had won my own life. But the story doesn't end there. You see, about 6 months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. Leo and I were overjoyed. We were going to have a baby, a little one of our own. And I knew, in that moment, that I was going to be the kind of mother my parents never were. I was going to love my child unconditionally. I was going to hold them and hug them and tell them every single day how much I loved them. I was going to break the cycle. The day I found out I was pregnant, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried. Not tears of joy, at first, tears of fear. Fear that I would become my mother. Fear that I wouldn't know how to love my child the way they deserved to be loved. Fear that I would somehow pass on the same emotional damage that had been inflicted on me. Leo found me there, sitting on the cold tile floor, clutching the positive pregnancy test. "Ellie, what's wrong? Are you okay?" I looked up at him, my eyes red and swollen. What if I'm like them, Leo? What if I can't be a good mother? What if I turn out just like her? He knelt down beside me and took my face in his hands. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You are nothing like them. Nothing. You are the most loving, caring, compassionate person I have ever known. You are going to be an amazing mother. The best mother. Because you know what it feels like to not be loved. And you are going to make sure your child never feels that way. You are going to give them everything you never had." He was right. I knew he was right. The very fact that I was afraid proved that I was already a better mother than mine ever was. My mother never worried about being a bad mother. She just was one. And she never even noticed. I decided not to tell my parents about the pregnancy. They didn't deserve to know. They didn't deserve to be part of my child's life. I had already closed that chapter. I was ready to move on. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. About 7 months into my pregnancy, I got a phone call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello," I said. "Eleanor, it's your mother." The voice was weak, frail. It didn't sound like my mother at all. It sounded like a stranger. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "Please don't hang up," she said. "I need to talk to you. Your father is sick, very sick. He has cancer. We don't have long." I felt my heart stop. Even after everything, even after all the pain and the anger, hearing that my father was dying sent a shockwave through my body. "What?" I whispered. "What are you talking about?" "He's been sick for a while now," she said, her voice trembling. We didn't want to tell you. We thought we could handle it on our own, but it's getting worse. The doctors say he only has a few months. He wants to see you, Alina. He wants to make things right before he goes. I didn't know what to say. 1,000 emotions were racing through me. Anger, sadness, confusion, guilt. I don't know if I can do that, I finally said. After everything you've done. I know, she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I know what we did was wrong. We were terrible parents. We were selfish and cruel, and we treated you like a transaction. I know that. I've had a lot of time to think about it, watching your father waste away. I realize now that we made a terrible mistake. We lost you. We lost our only daughter, and we have no one to blame but ourselves. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. Why now? I asked. Why wait until it's too late? Because we were too proud, she said. Because we didn't know how to admit we were wrong. But now, with your father facing the end, everything has changed. We don't want to die with this hanging over us. We want to make amends. We want to try to repair what we broke. I sat down on the couch, my hand on my pregnant belly. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. I don't know if I can ever forget what you did to me, the pain you caused me, the years of emotional abuse. I know, she said. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I'm asking you to give us a chance. Just one chance to say goodbye, to say we're sorry. That's all I'm asking for. I looked at Leo, who was sitting beside me, holding my hand. He squeezed it gently, giving me a look that said, "It's your decision. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." "Give me some time to think about it," I said. "I'll call you back." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Leo held me, not saying anything. He just let me process. Finally, I spoke. "What should I do, Leo?" He looked at me with so much love in his eyes. "I can't tell you what to do, sweetheart. This is your family. This is your pain. You have to do what feels right for you. But I will say this. You have a chance to close this chapter for good. To say what you need to say. To get the closure you never had. And you might not get another chance." I thought about it for days. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The idea of seeing my parents again, of facing all that pain, was overwhelming. But Leo was right. This might be my last chance. My last chance to confront them. My last chance to let them know how they hurt me. My last chance to try to find some kind of peace. In the end, I decided to go. I was 7 months pregnant, heavy and uncomfortable, but I knew I had to do this. For myself. For my own peace of mind. I arrived at the hospital alone. Leo offered to come with me, but I needed to do this on my own. My mother was waiting for me in the lobby. She looked old, broken. The sharp, calculating woman I had known my whole life was gone. In her place was a tired, sad old lady. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I know this isn't easy for you." "Where is he?" I asked, not wanting to make small talk. "Third floor, room 312. She led me to the elevator, and we rode up in silence. When I walked into the hospital room, I almost didn't recognize my father. He was thin, pale, hooked up to machines. The strong, silent man who had always seemed so unshakable was now fragile and weak. "Alina," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You came." I walked over to the bed, my heart pounding. "I'm here," I said. "You wanted to see me." "Your mother told you?" he asked. "She told me you wanted to make things right." He coughed, a deep, rattling cough that shook his whole body. "I don't have much time left," he said, "and I need to say something to you before I go. I need to tell you that I'm sorry. I was a terrible father. I was distant and cold, and I never gave you the love you deserved. I was so focused on work, on money, on maintaining our image, that I forgot what was really important. I forgot my daughter." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Why now, Dad? Why wait until you're dying to say this?" "Because I was a coward," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I was a coward and I was ashamed. I didn't know how to be a father. My own father was the same way. Cold, distant, always telling me I wasn't good enough. I thought that was just how fathers were supposed to be. I never realized I could be different. I never realized I could break the cycle." My mother was standing in the corner, crying softly. "We both failed you, Alina," she said. "We were so obsessed with money, with status, with what other people thought, that we forgot what truly mattered. We forgot to love you the way you deserve to be loved. I stood there, looking at my two broken parents, the people who had caused me so much pain, the people who had made me feel worthless, the people who had demanded $500,000 for raising me. And I felt something I didn't expect. I felt pity. I've spent my whole life trying to earn your love, I said, my voice shaking. I've spent my whole life feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I was a burden, like I was a debt that needed to be paid, and it ruined me. It ruined so many parts of me. I know, my father said. I know what we did to you, and I can never take it back. But I can tell you that I'm sorry. I can tell you that I love you. I should have said it 1,000,000 times over the years. I should have held you and hugged you and told you how proud I was of you. And I didn't. And I'm so sorry. I took a deep breath. I'm going to be a mother soon, I said. And I promise you, I am going to be everything you never were. I am going to love my child unconditionally. I am going to hold them and hug them and tell them every single day how much I love them. I am going to break the cycle. My father reached out a shaking hand toward me. I know you will, he said, because you are a good person, Alina. You are better than we ever were. You always have been. I took his hand. It was cold and bony. Thank you, I said, for saying this, for being brave enough to admit you were wrong. I only wish I had done it sooner, he said. I only wish I had been a better father. We sat there in silence for a while, the three of us. It was strange. After all the anger, all the pain, we were just three broken people trying to find some kind of peace. There's something else, my mother said softly. We want to give you something. We want to make up for what we did. She walked over to a bag and pulled out a folder. It was the same kind of leather-bound folder my father always carried. She handed it to me. Open it. I opened the folder. Inside was a legal document. It was a gift deed. My parents were giving me their house, the house I had grown up in, the house where I had been made to feel so small. I don't understand, I said. What is this? It's our way of saying we're sorry, my mother said. We've already signed the papers. The house is yours. You can sell it, keep it, do whatever you want with it. It's your way of finally being free of us. I stared at the document, tears streaming down my face. This is too much, I said. I can't accept this. Yes, you can, my father said. It's not payment for all the years of pain we caused you. Nothing could ever pay for that. But it's something. It's the only thing we have to give you. Please take it. Let us do this one thing right. I thought about all the years I had spent in that house. All the pain, all the sadness, all the feeling of being trapped. And now it was mine. It was a symbol of everything I had overcome. I don't know what to say, I whispered. You don't have to say anything, my mother said. Just take it and build your life, the life you deserve. I hugged them both. It was strange. I didn't feel love, not really. But I felt something that felt like closure. Something that felt like peace. A few months later, my father passed away. I cried at his funeral, not because I loved him, but because I mourned the relationship we never had. I mourned the father I never got to have, but I also felt a sense of release. The chapter was finally closed. I never fully forgave my parents for what they did. Some things are too painful to truly forgive, but I made peace with it. I accepted that they were broken people who broke me, but that I was strong enough to heal myself. And I did heal. I healed with Leo, with my new family, with my beautiful baby boy who was born a month after my father's funeral. I named him James after my father, not because I wanted to honor him, but because I wanted to give my child the one thing my father never gave me, a fresh start, a chance to be different, a chance to break the cycle. The whole story, the wedding day, the invoice, the revenge, it became a sort of legend among my friends. Julia still tells it at parties, and people look at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. Some people think it was cold. Some people think it was genius. All I know is that it saved me. It saved me from a lifetime of being owned by them. It took me a long time to realize that their demand for money was never really about the money. It was about control. It was their last attempt to assert their dominance over me, to remind me that they owned me. By demanding a payment for raising me, they were trying to keep me on their ledger, to make sure I knew I was theirs. By giving them my own invoice, I took that power away. I showed them that the debt was not one-sided. that their actions had a cost, an emotional cost that far outweighed the financial cost of my upbringing. It was the most liberating moment of my life. It was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started being my own person. It was the moment I stopped being a liability and started being an asset to myself, an asset to my husband, to my new chosen family. The story isn't about revenge in the sense of wanting to hurt them. It was never about that. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. It was about telling them and telling myself that my childhood, my pain, my love was not something to be monetized. It was about showing them that the scales of justice they had so carefully maintained their whole lives were weighted in my favor. It was poetic justice, served cold, and in the form of a meticulously itemized invoice. They wanted $500,000 for raising me. I gave them a $450,000 bill for the emotional damage they inflicted. And by doing so, I declared myself debt-free. Not just financially, but emotionally. The account was closed, the books were balanced, and I could finally, truly begin my life. So that is my story. It's a story of a wedding that was almost ruined, of a childhood that was almost stolen, and a daughter who decided she would not be defined by her parents' ledger. It is a story of a girl who realized that the only way to be free was to make her parents own weapons their undoing. It's not a fairy tale. It doesn't have a charming prince who saves her. It has a woman who saved herself. And in the end, that's the only kind of story worth telling. The kind where you win back your own heart and your own soul and walk away from the table without paying a cent, your head held high, ready for the life you were always meant to live. Today, I sit in the living room of my parents' old house, holding my son James in my arms. Leo is beside me, his arm around my shoulder. The framed invoice still sits on our bookshelf, a reminder of where I came from. But it doesn't fill me with anger anymore. It fills me with pride. Pride in how far I've come, pride in the woman I've become, pride in the life I've built. My parents are gone now. They've been gone for years, but their legacy lives on. Not in the bitterness and pain they caused me, but in the lessons I learned. The lesson that love is more important than money. The lesson that family is about more than blood. The lesson that you are never defined by the people who hurt you. You are defined by how you rise above it. I look at James, at his perfect little face, and I feel nothing but love. I promise him, in that moment, that he will never feel the way I felt. He will never feel like a burden. He will never feel like a debt. He will be loved. Unconditionally, always. And that, more than anything, is my revenge. Not the invoice. Not the $450,000. Not the closure. The revenge is my happiness. My freedom. My love. The revenge is living a life so full of joy that my parents' cruelty becomes nothing more than a distant memory. So if you're out there, listening this, and you're going through something similar, I want you to know something. You are not alone. You are not a debt. You are not a burden. You are worthy of love. You are worthy of happiness. And you have the power to break the cycle. You have the power to walk away. You have the power to build a life that is truly your own. And that, my friend, is the sweetest revenge of all.